Good morning, Minecrafters, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 16, Don't Bite the Hook. So, Minecrafters, what we're going to kind of chat about today is reacting versus responding, which, we have touched on before in previous episodes, but not like today. So, please bear with me, and wow, is this timely. And it also brings in another cultural idea, which I'm a big fan of. I love when we incorporate ideas from different countries, different religions, different everybody, right? And I don't know if this has ever been so timely. Certainly, it's been timely through history, and right now we'll just say it's also timely, and maybe that's the best way to say it. As we're talking about this urge to react, and in our everyday lives, when somebody says something to us, does something to us, talks about us, says it's something politically. I know in the US we have a whole lot going on right now. And it's kind of like, learning to hit the pause button. And what we're going to talk about today is something called Shenpa. And I'm going to actually talk to you about a book written by Pema Chandran, which is Practicing Peace in Times of War. And I'll tell you, my best friend gave this book to me for my birthday recently in December. And it's this little book, and I thought, wow, and she's extremely wise and genuine. And I just thought this must be a good read, or she would not have sent it in my direction. And I'll tell you, this is something I think all of us can relate to. I can for sure. I'm kind of aware of my wiring anyway, because managing impulse control has always been something I've had to stay on top of, and that's because my ADHD issues. Though I think all of us, have had moments where we just kind of like knee jerk reactions. So here goes. This is how Pima starts it out. She says, in Tibetan, there's a word that points to the root cause of aggression, the root cause also of craving. It points to a familiar experience that is at the root of all conflict, all cruelty, oppression, and greed. The word is Shenpa. The usual translation is attachment, but this doesn't adequately express the full meaning. I think of Shenpa as quote unquote getting hooked. Another definition used by Dzigar Kongtrul Rinpoche is the charge behind our thoughts and words and actions, the charge behind like and don't like. Okay, so think about this. Somebody might, criticize us even on the smallest of levels. It could be with a look. In fact, it could be with a misinterpreted look, right? I think most of us have had that experience, especially if we're not feeling like our best self that day. Our filter might be off. So someone might give us a glance that day that we interpret as, oh, they don't like how I look. They don't like what I'm wearing. They don't like, who knows what they don't like. Whereas another day where we're feeling a little more confident, that glance might be the opposite, right? Oh, they must like how I look, or they must like this, or must like that. But it's when we're in that, you know, um, lower place that we often interpret things maybe in not the best way, and we make assumptions. Then, there's someone who may overtly criticize it where we're not guessing. They might say, I don't like this. I don't like how you look. I don't like how you handled that. I don't like what you said, blah, 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 blah. Or they might make a criticism against someone we love and care about, our child or our partner. And, in that moment, think about how we feel. Think about that immediate feeling, and just try to reflect on that for a moment. The next time this happens to you, and I'll tell you, even though I'm kind of aware of my predisposition to maybe react without hitting the pause button, I've thankfully at 56 gotten way better at it. And still, when I read this, it gave me this new awareness of, wow, the next time this happens where I can't wait to say something, or I really want to sit with that millisecond, or few milliseconds of what that actually feels like. And I want to ask that you do the same. Really Really feel that. And Pima says that in moments like this, ask yourself how it feels. And she says, this feeling has a familiar taste and a familiar smell. Once you begin to notice it, you feel like this experience has been around forever. That sticky feeling is Shenpa. This is also where I think it's just so, not just enriching, but also just plain fun to bring in other cultures. And because I can't think of this exact translation in any other language, or that I know. We can come up with something similar, but that's why I think it's so fun. I love languages too, I have to tell you, because sometimes there's a particular word or phrase or idea that just isn't directly translatable, in Russian or German or Swahili or French or Spanish or whatever. And I think this whole idea of Shenpa is just very, very cool. And I just began reading more, and I just was swallowed up whole by this idea. And I really like Pima's word choice of sticky, because that's what I think of too. I think of course, Vermont maple syrup or something. It's delicious, but once you get on your hands, it just seems like it just travels, like it's just sticky, and you can't get it off, can't get away from it, kind of thing, or even stickier, like super glue. And so she continues that, okay, that sticky feeling is Shenpa, she says, and it comes along with a very seductive urge to do something. Somebody says a harsh word, and immediately you can feel a shift. There's a tightening that rapidly spirals into mentally blaming this person or wanting revenge or blaming yourself. Then you speak or act. The charge behind the tightening, behind the urge, behind the storyline or action is Shenpa. Another good word choice here, this is just very well written, is seductive. Often we think of, that having like a sexual connotation. We think that's used a lot in the movies, out in the media. And that isn't, for me, that isn't what's going on here. I also think of another way it's used a lot, which maybe can be going on here too. I'm thinking how we can be seduced. We can be seduced away from um, being our best self and making our best choices. And I'm thinking actually of Star Wars too, where Anakin Skywalker is seduced over to the dark side. And I think of seduced as being pulled away from what we otherwise might do, think, feel, or do. A real being pulled away with what Pima also says, the charge behind this tightening. So it's a real pull. It's a real strong, strong pull. I'm sure most of us as individuals have had this experience when we've been in a very passionate argument with someone, coworker, friend, partner, whomever, about a topic that we were, just very, very passionate about and got excited. And I know I've had the experience of before long, especially if there's more than one person, you're in a group of people, and all of a sudden you kind of lose sight of, where the whole thing stemmed from. It can often, take on a life of its own. And Pima describes this as she says you can actually feel Shenpa happening. It's a sensation that you can easily recognize. Even a spot on your new sweater can take you there. Someone looks at us in a certain way, or we hear a certain song, or walk into a certain room, and boom, we're hooked. It's a quality of experience that's not easy to describe, but that everyone knows well. Wow, is that spot on and just so well said. Okay, and so here's the thing. So as individuals, I know for sure, I'm on a Shenpa watch from here on in. Again, I've been aware of this, 56, and working on it. Now that it actually has this name, this cool name, it's actually gotten easier for me to think about. I'm on Shenpa alert because, again, awareness is key, right? We can't do what we don't know. And once we do know, we can do better. I think we should kind of, raise the bar and expect ourselves to do better, right? And when I think of something like what just happened with, the siege on Capitol Hill in the States, or and which we've had a lot of in this country, and so does everybody. Pick a country, pick any, and a time when that country had, a moment when things snowballed and people were reacting all over the place, not hitting the pause button, filled with passion, filled with Shenpa and the urge to, and to be and being seduced into, whatever reaction is going on at that time. And we just stop and think about how this, how it's an individual thing, this sticky feeling that we want to have that urge to react, and then how that snowballs and expands when there are lots of us experiencing this. And I just think, metaphorically, this is so amazing. Pema Chodron's book is entitled Practicing Peace in Times of War. We've got the thing that, happened in Capitol Hill, or again, pick a different, event in a different country, it's fine. And also how this is on the inside, because practicing peace in times of war, that can also be fitting for, the war we have with ourselves. So many of us, are, especially in midlife, I can say that, working through our own kind of civil war where we've got, demons or monsters from the past that we're, kind of trying to work through with internal strife going on the inside, and how the Shenpa idea is so fitting for the internal conflict, which again, like when we see when people band together with this urge, becomes a very overt external conflict. And without getting too political, because I reserve those conversations for my husband, now our young adult children, which is wonderfully enjoyable, and our closest friends, strictly from a psychological perspective. Okay, psychological perspective. With the siege on Capitol Hill, we can see how this fits very much with this sticky urge to react, and how in the very beginning of this episode we talked about, here I can go back for a second, when she talks about Shenpa coming from is Tibetan, and a word that points to the root cause of aggression, the root cause of aggression, and also the root cause of craving, which of course is this, can be overwhelming, seductive, not just a feeling, it's a need, right? We think of craving in the sense of a chemical substance or whatever, and it's kind of like trying to hold in a sneeze. You can't not do it. And I think that the craving part combined with the aggression part, with say something like happened on Capitol Hill, this makes very good sense. So again, the action for our sake of our conversation, psychologically speaking, when I was watching this footage, trying to, it wasn't easy to separate the emotion, of course, though psychologically I was intrigued by, at what point did any of these protesters, or terrorists, I don't know, fill in the blank with that. At what point did this group of people think this was a good idea? Even personally speaking, that someone wouldn't get hurt, that they themselves wouldn't get hurt, or that they wouldn't end up in prison. And this is kind of what we're talking about on a bigger level, right? So we talk about the individuals maybe being in a regular conversation, hurting someone's feelings or getting hurt yourself, or even potentially ruining a relationship. And then we amplify that when we have the Shenpa of, thousands of people together. Again, you can airlift that to some other event in some other country because it isn't different. Okay. All that Shenpa in one place, that sticky, knee jerky, seductive feeling that just pulls us in and away from our best selves and making our best choices. When that happens on such a big level, um, just think of how overwhelming that is. And on the positive note, how, if we become more aware of it, if we become more aware of it on the individual level, how some of these things, may at the very least lessen. I like to say prevented, and like be super positive and optimistic, at least be reduced. So the point is, even on an individual level, when we get seduced by our Shenpa, that we very easily can sort of lose the ability to see around the corner, to see the consequences from our words or our actions, even just in a conversation. And then we bring it to, again, a bigger level where there's lots of people, lots of Shenpa, and how this inability to see around the corner from the group's, actions or activities can be, often tragic and catastrophic, causing lots of, damage and pain to lots of people. Though obviously with such a big, um, event or riot, or however you want to say, just like, again, the many others across the world throughout history have been, they're obviously more complicated. There's more involved. Although I think we can say with confidence that without question, this idea of Shenpa, the root cause of aggression, and this urge to react rather than respond. Respond is, of course, a slowed down, more well thought out, gather the facts conversation, right? This is reacting. I think without a doubt, we can say that this sticky, urge to react to what we perceive to be a violation, is definitely involved here. And psychologically, there could be so much to talk about here, even with just some of the famous um, experiments with conformity, like the famous Milgram experiment, also the Stanford prison experiment with Phil Zimbardo. He's done a ton of work, actually. If any of you are interested, he's done a lot with the psychology of evil. He's just very amazing. And if we look back through history, we could have even a bigger conversation. We could also bring in the fundamental attribution error, right? And which of course is when we desire to sort of assign a cause to someone's behavior. How typically it's either dispositional, meaning, personality trait, character trait, or situational. It's interesting that when we want to explain the behavior of others, we often go straight for the character. And they did this because they are this, they are that, they are this. And when we want to explain our own behavior, we often go with what's going on externally in our environment. Well, it's because that happens, because this happened. Somebody said this, did that, whatever. Also very interesting. So we could go a million different ways. However, really, what the main focus here is for us as individuals to become a little bit more aware of that sneeze as it's building, kind of, like we're trying to hold back that sneeze. Become aware of the sneeze when it's starting to build before it gets to the place where we can't hold it in. And then Pima continues to explain to us. She says, now, if you catch Shenpa early enough, it's very workable. Thank goodness, right? You can acknowledge that it's happening and abide with the experience of being triggered, the experience of the urge, the experience of wanting to move. It's like experiencing the yearning to scratch an itch, and generally we find it irresistible. Nevertheless, we can practice patience with that fidgety feeling and hold our seat. And of course, as my frequent listeners are aware, my mind crafters, much I love the concept of practicing something and the skill of learning to practice something, because we know what we practice, we will eventually get good at it. We know that, and we'll see, get the kudos along the way because we can see the improvement. Anything, whether it's playing the violin or learning a language or skiing or whatever it is, we will get good at it. And also, sadly, that works in the reverse direction. We can practice aggression and practice rage and practice intolerance and practice, just non-acceptance, and get really good at sort of closed-minded, intolerant thinking. It works in both directions. And so this practicing patience really set with me. And it's amazing how the universe sends you what you need to hear when you need to hear it. It's all about being receptive, of course. We can ignore it, though I am very receptive. And when my friend sent this to me, I thought, wow. And I also thought my husband's going to get a big old chuckle out of this one, because with my wiring, though I certainly was given this wonderfully large gift bag of things that are positive. And though patience is just not one the good Lord threw in there, I'll tell you that right now. So I constantly have to work at that because I am not naturally patient. And I have no trouble admitting that. I have to work at it every day and breathe and be mindful. And this is what came to my mind when I read this, because she says, nevertheless, we can practice patience with that fidgety feeling and hold our seat. And she also says fidgety feelings. With my particular wiring, I am just so aware of that just nudgy, just fidgety on the inside. And of course, as an adult person, a seasoned adult person, I've had to learn to be comfortable with that. I've learned to have to be comfortable with the uncomfortable because that's how I'm wired and it's not going away. So I have to learn how to just have this dialogue in my head. Okay, I know that you're excited. I know you want to say something. You want to jump into the conversation. Breathe deeply on the inside. Wait till there's a natural pause in the conversation. And that is when you enter in and say what you read in the article yesterday or whatever. And of course, like all of us, or many of us, I'll fall off the horse and maybe not be successful at that sometimes. And then I'll have this aha moment of, okay, you interrupted or whatever. So, just awareness, bring myself back into that place of awareness and non judgment, to just regroup and, get back on the horse and be mindful, which is what we're talking about throughout the rest of that conversation, or if that conversation is done with the next conversation. And this mindful awareness is really what we're talking about with Shenpa. And that just kind of roped me in because mindfulness just does so much for us. In the particular context of this topic, really what we want to zoom in on as far as the part of mindfulness that works best here is that part of mindfulness that's about the non-judgment piece. That is the most important part with what we're talking about. So rather than other types of meditation or just daily living, right? Walking around having that internal dialogue, rather than saying, we have that anxious thought and we say, oh, there goes my anxiety again. Or we have an angry thought, oh, there goes my anger again. Or with the aggressive thing we were talking about, rather than kind of escalating it by judgment, when we say, just breathe deeply and say, oh, there goes an anxious thought. It must be I'm anxious today. When we actually get good at practicing that, we get good at not judging ourselves. That's where the trickle down or trickle over effect happens, where we kind of inherently, naturally, gradually become less judgment of other people. It just kind of happens. We don't have to think about it because we're becoming, more accepting of ourselves. We become more accepting of people. It's just a natural process. And it's gradual, right? It doesn't mean we're not going to fall off the horse. We just get back on. But this is really what we're talking about here. So Pima continues, she says, in these moments, we can contact the underlying insecurity of the human experience. Wow, right there. The insecurity of the human experience, the insecurity that is inherent in a changing, shifting world. I think we should stay right there for a minute because if we think of, again, the Capitol Hill siege, and that gorgeous building, I have to tell you, my husband was so sad because he just loves Washington, D.C., as do the rest of us. But he's just such a fan of, loves all the buildings and everything. And I'm sure that was the case for a lot of people. When we feel this urge and we get in touch with what's really there, what's really sort of the source of it, that insecurity of the human experience, that's what we want to stop there and say, what's going on with me? What is going on with me inside that kind of wrap around that brokenness, which we all have, right? It's what makes us human. We wrap around that brokenness, hopefully, while we're in that Shenpa, while we're in that experience of wanting to react, but pausing and really feeling that yucky stickiness. She says, as long as we are habituated to needing something to hold on to, we will always feel this background rumble of slight unease or restlessness. We want some relief from the unease. So when Shenpa arises, we go on automatic pilot without a pause. We follow the urge and get swept away. And if that isn't what happened to Capitol Hill, obviously more complicated. We're not saying that, but it was definitely like any of these other big events that happen worldwide. They take on a life of their own. So the word automatic is a good choice because it gets bigger than the one individual or the two or the three or the 1,000 or the 2,000. It takes on a life of its own. And we become on a Shenpa group automatic pilot without a pause, without the ability to pause anymore. And we follow the urge and get swept away. And I think we all know what the results of that are, and they're not pretty. So I just think this is such a wonderful awareness for today, and to really see the tie in our own individual Shenpa, you know, to that of having, two or three more people in a conversation or whatever. And when we react rather than respond, in general, it doesn't go well. Maybe the one exception is reacting when, a toddler's about to walk out in front of a car or something. Well, that's obviously has a good result. The rest of the time, though, reacting generally results in someone getting hurt. And when lots of people react, lots of people get hurt. It's kind of a no-brainer. And I just think um, the Shenpa awareness is something that, certainly we all can really use right now. So Pima says, mostly we don't catch Shenpa at an early stage. We don't catch the tightening until we've already indulged the urge to scratch or itch in some habitual way. In fact, unless we equate not acting out with friendliness toward ourselves, this refraining can feel like putting on a straitjacket, and we struggle against it. And that brings on a whole nother level, right? We struggle against it because we know when Carl Jung, sort of famous for his phrase, that which we resist will persist, right? And the more energy we give to it, it all snowballs and gets worse. We know that. And then she says, the best way to develop our ability to stay fully present with Shenpa and to equate that loving kindness is in meditation. This is where we can train in not getting swept away. Amen, Pima. Go, sister. I think this is well said. Because with mindfulness, of course, there are specific loving kindness meditations. Again, I'm a big fan of mindfulness because I take it with me. I mean, not in this lifetime am I going to, sit in a cave eating yogurt, crisscross applesauce, as my kids used to say. Plus, my left knee wouldn't like that anyway. But, just, being mindful with whatever I'm doing. Skiing last week, mindful, the beautiful snowy canopy effect, out in the woods, walking the dog, gardening, washing the dishes, taking a shower, eating. It isn't about carving out time. It's about just being. It's about being. We can just stop right there, right? And again, with this particular topic, I really want to zoom in on the non-judgmental piece because this, truthfully, is where the healing happens, right? And when we heal that brokenness in ourselves, obviously think about that on a global level. I know it sounds very utopian. However, even just logically, it makes sense, right? One person becomes less judgmental, then two, then three, then 10, then 20. And before long, think of what that would do for the whole world. And also the mindfulness thing related to this particular topic also increases our ability to not only to open our minds, but also to listen actively. So obviously, politically, with what's going on in the States, again, it's way more complicated. Or again, pick another country, pick another situation, pick another timeline even, right? Active listening just goes right out the window because everybody's all caught in the quicksand of Shenpa and people aren't listening to each other. So it just picks up momentum and more momentum and doesn't go anywhere good. Okay, so the active listening thing. All right, so Pima says meditation teaches us how to open and relax with whatever arises. Think about that because that's not easy to do. That sounds so smooth. That is not easy to become open to whatever arises. Many people right now are not all that open, right? Without picking and choosing. It teaches us to experience the uneasiness and the urge fully and to interrupt the momentum that usually follows. Think about what a big statement that is. Think about that sounds so smooth and easy, but to interrupt that snowball while it's traveling downhill so quickly, getting bigger with every time it rolls. Awfully tough. And this is why it's so important to be aware of this snowball when it begins, when it just starts out as a little baby snowball, so that we can sort of interrupt that momentum. Pima says we do this by not following after the thoughts. It's just so important. We do this by not following after the thoughts and learning to return again and again to the present moment. To return to the present moment. We train in sitting still with the itch of Shenpa and with our craving to scratch. We label our storylines thinking and let them dissolve. And we come back to right now, even when right now doesn't feel so great. Well said again, Pima. This is what I was saying earlier about becoming with the uncomfortable. We all have moments of that, right? Probably daily, because people don't like to be uncomfortable, even at the dentist, never mind some big political issue. And to really sit with that and kind of get in touch with what's the itch about, what's the urge about, what's my own insecurity about, or what's broken in me that's having me wanting to just knee jerk here. And she says, when we learn to sit with that right now, it doesn't feel so great. This is how we learn patience. This is how we learn patience and how we learn to interrupt the chain reaction of habitual responses that otherwise will rule our lives. And so, Minecrafters, it seems like a wonderfully just like a natural wind up to our conversation. So, my wish for all of you is to develop Shenpa awareness. I'm doing this myself, and I'm admittedly a work in progress. Also, remember that it's about progress and not perfection. We don't ever want to have the bar that high. We want the bar to be at do the best we can every day in every way, and that's it. And if you're a little bit more aware of your Shenpa today than you were yesterday, consider yourself to be successful. Give yourself a pat on the back. If you should slide a little, you just reel yourself back in with loving kindness and start over. Even if it's in the same day, start it over at 1 o'clock, start it over at 12:15, start it over at 3, whatever, and just get back on the ship, okay? And that's it. I want to thank you all for listening in this wonderful country, this great country of America, and great countries all over this wonderful world of ours. And that's it. Have a mindful and Shenpa aware day. This is Kimberly Quinn signing off for Northern Vermont.